How's it going, everyone? It's Sam. Blackrock just came out with some embargoed news that was absolutely insane. This will drive massive adoption into Bitcoin. This will send the price skyrocketing. We have other news coming up in just a few minutes, actually, like an hour from the time of this recording. The person that's announcing this news has said this is, how do you say it? The most important announcement in Bitcoin is happening in about 1 hour. So there's a lot going on. If you don't mind, hit subscribe, turn on the bell notification underneath the video so you can see future videos just like this. Also, if you want to trade crypto, there's a link to Blofin underneath the video. We just had the highest ever daily close on Bitcoin. If you're not bullish right now, I don't know what it takes. If you want to trade crypto, like I said, check out Blofin. You know, I use multiple exchanges. This is one of the ones I use. I really like it. And right now, they have a little promotion. Your loss, we cover. $100 refund bonus. Of course, there are some terms and conditions. Always read those, but you can get set up in just a few minutes. Now, look at this. Dennis Porter. It's happening. The most important announcement in Bitcoin is happening in less than 48 hours. This is from a few days ago at 11 a.m. Eastern time, so maybe an hour after the time of this recording. They're going to have the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve announcement. I've said this several times, but I'm guessing it's some state that is going to introduce some legislation to buy Bitcoin. And of course, that would have to get approved. But he also posts, many do not realize that 4 states in the U.S. account for 4 of the 15 largest economies in the world. Russia's economy is smaller than California and Texas and is barely bigger than New York and Florida. Strategic Bitcoin Reserve at the state level in the U.S. would be huge. So again, I'm guessing it's one of these states. Maybe it's Florida or Texas that is introducing legislation to either study Bitcoin or to buy Bitcoin and put it into their local government. We had Vancouver just say last night that they want to study Bitcoin and possibly integrate it into their finances. So be on the lookout for this. You know, this might seem like it's a bit overselling in the short term, but I think this is a very important step if I'm right in what he's going to announce. Right? This is a very important step to get the next state to start looking at Bitcoin, and eventually someone will approve it, someone will start buying Bitcoin, and then the nations will jump in as well. Now, we did get some inflation data. I don't even have that pulled up, but PPI came in a little bit higher than expected. So, yeah, the market is going back and forth on this news here today, maybe a little bit scared that inflation's ticking up, but I think we're going to be fine. Take a look at what happened to Bitcoin yesterday. About 450 Bitcoin mined. In the US, Bitcoin ETFs bought 28,600 Bitcoin last week. MSTR bought 21,550 Bitcoin last week. Mara bought about 12,000 Bitcoin with their 1 billion offering. US Bitcoin ETFs bought 11,600 Bitcoin so far this week. Riot announced a $500 million offering, and MSTR has another $28 billion authorized Bitcoin buy remaining. So yeah, the supply is smaller than the demand at this point. There's just so many people that want to get their hands on some Bitcoin. We had 223 million bought by the ETFs yesterday. It was a bit of a slower day, you know, only $200 million being bought. But yeah, 223 million. Part of the reason that it wasn't a little bit higher, IBIT had a rare 0 day. We have FBTC with 122 million, and even GBTC had a positive day yesterday. So yeah, overall, a lot of buying happening from all the ETFs but BlackRock yesterday. But here is where something really interesting happens. New report from BlackRock today that recommends 1 to 2% exposure to Bitcoin ETFs. First time that they've given a specific number. They put this out because they had so many people asking this kind of question. So they had this embargoed until Thursday at 8:30, so about an hour ago, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time, sizing Bitcoin in portfolios. For investors who wish to include Bitcoin in a multi-asset portfolio, we outline an approach for how to think about sizing the allocation to it. This is the exact wording. They say, so how can investors think about Bitcoin allocation? Bitcoin cannot be compared to traditional assets, but from a portfolio construction perspective, the Magnificent Seven group of mostly mega cap tech stocks is a useful starting point. These stocks represent single portfolio holdings that account for a comparatively large share of portfolio risk, as with Bitcoin. In a traditional portfolio with a mix of 60% stocks and 40% bonds, those 7 stocks each account for, on average, about the same share of the portfolio risk as a 1 to 2% allocation to Bitcoin. We think that's a reasonable range for a Bitcoin exposure. Why not more? Going beyond that would sharply increase Bitcoin's share of overall portfolio risk. Keep in mind, they are speaking to the average investor here, right? They've run different studies, they've run different conferences where they've said a much larger exposure makes sense. A couple of years ago, actually, during the bear market, they had a couple analysts that ran some numbers, did a study, and found that, honestly, you should go leverage Bitcoin. If you're a risk-tolerant investor, you should have 106% allocation to Bitcoin just based on the numbers. For a less risk-tolerant investor, they said 85%. Earlier this year, when they had a conference that was just, or a meetup, I don't know, a conference for really wealthy individuals for different large companies, they said from their quant, it was leaked, that a 28% allocation to Bitcoin would not be unreasonable. Here, they don't, when you're speaking to millions of people, you don't want to say 30% and then have a bunch of people freak out when volatility spikes and maybe Bitcoin drops 30%. And they're like, hey, 9% of my portfolio just vanished and I'm going to sell. No, you don't want to have to deal with that. So basically, like, they're saying, hey, get in, buy 1% to 2%. And then they realize that if someone buys 1%, they're probably not going to really look at it. They're not going to notice it if they're just looking at their portfolio. So even if it drops 50% in a bear market, they'll just continue to allocate towards it and they'll come out ahead. So 1% to 2%, I think, is where they start. And I think they will probably grow this over time. Like, eventually, it'll be much easier to say, well, why would you have 40% bonds? Those always lag. What you should do is like 70% stocks, 20% bonds, 10% Bitcoin. And then they'll continue to ramp it up. That might be like a couple levels up from here, but eventually they'll continue to ramp this up to where maybe Bitcoin completely outpaces bonds, right? We'll have to watch. But what does this mean? A 1% to 2% allocation. Okay, let's go with 2% here. No, let's go with 1%. It will seem less drastic. A 1% allocation, keep in mind the AUM at Blackrock, last time I looked, is 13 trillion. Yeah, so this is a little bit delayed. This is from 2021. There was a more recent report that said it was around 13 trillion. So $13 trillion. At a 1% allocation, that would be $130 billion flowing into Bitcoin. Now, does that pump Bitcoin up that amount? No, it actually pushes up the market cap much more. Now, one thing that I think people get wrong, honestly, and I saw a couple posts about this, there's this thing called the bull market multiple, right? Basically, if you go out and buy, and congrats everyone, Bitcoin's at $2 trillion. If you go out and buy a significant amount of Bitcoin at one time, there's a multiple on it in terms of the market cap. So if someone goes out and buys $1 billion worth of Bitcoin right now, it does not push up the market cap $1 billion. There's actually a multiple on it because of scarcity and because not every Bitcoin's on the open market. So what certain banks have found out is it's about 100 to 120 bull market multiple when there's less liquidity. So you go out and buy $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, it pushes up the price, or the market cap, I should say. It pushes up the market cap of Bitcoin maybe $100 billion. Again, this is on average, right? It doesn't happen every time, but that means that if a large entity was going to buy 200 billion or 100 billion, let's call it $100 billion worth of Bitcoin at one time, that could shoot up the price 100x that amount. So that sounds kind of crazy, but that means someone comes in and buys 100 billion at one time. That could shoot up the price of Bitcoin about $10 trillion. Now, what I think people are getting wrong, and I saw some people posting about this, people that I actually really respect, saying that, if BlackRock does a 1% allocation or 2%, that could push up the price $10 to $20 trillion. The fact is, they're not going to get everyone on board, first of all, and also it's staggered. You have to remember that. So when buys are staggered, it doesn't push up the price, I think, the same multiple, right? Because there are more natural sellers. If the price of Bitcoin all of a sudden chops up to 105 because a small portion of people allocate 1% of their portfolio, there will be more profit takers, right? And then there'll be the same thing happening at 110, 115, 130. It's different if one entity comes in and buys $1 billion or $5 billion worth. It shoots up the price because it's an instant buy. It instantly shoots up the price. But again, we're talking about millions of people allocating 1 to 2%, and they're going to do it at all different times. So this is extremely bullish, and I think this will shoot up the price of Bitcoin. But some people are saying, well, if you do a 2% allocation to Bitcoin, if everyone at BlackRock does a 2% allocation, their AUM puts in, or their company puts in $200 billion worth of Bitcoin into their ETFs, that's going to shoot up the price to, $1 million. Again, I think you should temper your expectations. I think that's coming down the line, but I wouldn't expect all of a sudden for BlackRock to make a massive allocation in every single portfolio to 2% Bitcoin. Now, it'll take time. Not everyone will rotate that way ever, right? There will be some people that just never buy Bitcoin, but that kind of rotation takes a while. We've seen them start to buy in some of their own portfolios. I think last time I checked, it was 4 different portfolios they've added Bitcoin exposure to, but they're adding relatively small amounts right now. We're talking a few $1 million here or there. Eventually, they'll start adding tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, in my opinion, but it will, again, take time. Let me know your thoughts on all this underneath the video. I think this is extremely bullish. We have not that long until that announcement coming from Dennis Porter. Thank you so much. Again, if you want to check out Blofin, they have that little refund bonus in case you want to trade and you want to sign up. I'm extremely bullish on this market. If you are too, let me know down below in the comments. Thank you so much. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.